And currently she is working at LinkedIn in the advertising business. So please join me and let's welcome Shobhna. Hey Shobhna, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me, and I look forward to interacting with all of you.
Thank you. All right. So now, before we start asking questions around leadership and other things, I know we've all been talking about Booth, and I think having the Booth background kind of brought a lot of nostalgia, a lot of memories back. So going back in time, did you always want to be a leader when you started your career, or was it like there was a pivoting moment in your life when you were like, no, I think I have it in me to be a leader, or I want to be a leader?
Yeah, I think in terms of a goal and a dream, obviously had that idea in terms of leading a team or being a leader, but I didn't know the specifics in terms of what it meant, what kind of role, and also honestly whether I had the capability to be one. So it was a journey of discovering myself, discovering strengths, discovering areas of growth and opportunities, and working on them. So I would say it wasn't, something that I always knew, but it was a work in progress, still remains a work in progress. And there were multiple experiences along the way that helped me. And Booth experience was definitely a very strong one that helped me pivot and transition from, being an engineer to becoming a strategy professional, thinking about longer term vision and strategy, and then developing into a leader over time.
Wow. And I think the situation you just described, I think most of us are in this similar situation or have been in that similar situation where we want to be a leader, but we don't know whether we have the skill sets to be one. So is there like a moment that you can describe to us where, or any skill set that you recognize within yourself where you felt, or maybe somebody told you that, you know what, Shobna, I think you have these skill sets, you can be a great leader. So is there something that you can share with us for women or even men who have joined us today, who are trying to figure out whether they really have it in them to be a leader?
Yeah. As I said earlier, it's a process of self discovery that over time you realize your own strengths and your own areas of opportunity. And also, like when we use the term leader, I think we have a very high bar in terms of what it means. We see examples of, some very celebrated leaders in the world, and that is our sort of aspiration and bar. But I think on a day to day basis, the qualities that are needed and make an effective leader are actually things that are more achievable. So things like providing clarity and direction to the team, providing a vision, providing a common purpose that binds the team together, coaching them, mentoring them. These are all skills that can be developed and can be worked towards. So I think during my experience, both in consulting as well as now at LinkedIn, um, there were small experiences that reinforce that, okay, yes, I can provide that clarity, provide that structure to the team. I can provide the coaching and mentorship that's needed. So I think that's how I've progressed.
I think that's a very good point that you mentioned, that for a leader, he has to take everyone with him or her when he's moving up or when he is leading a project or any initiative. So I think you made that very good point over there. So now I think most of us have felt it, that imposter syndrome. It's considered it is a real thing. I have felt it, and I'm sure many other people, be it women or men, have felt imposter syndrome. So were there any moments in your life where you felt as an imposter, where you had to, and like how did you overcome that?
Yeah. I think the most relevant examples I can think of are from my consulting days. For those of you who've worked in consulting or are thinking about consulting, as a consultant, every few weeks you would show up at a new client, working on a new project with a new team, sometimes even in a new industry, and working with leaders and team members on the client side who have years and years of experience in that field. So that automatically leads to a situation where you may have lack of confidence in terms of will you be able to add value or deliver in that short 6 to 8 week period of the engagement or the project, and deliver something of impact and value to your clients. So I think I felt it a lot during consulting. Every time I started a new project, And the way to overcome that, and I think it's true for any challenge in professional life in general, is to both invest in yourself as well as pick the right environment and the surroundings. So, in terms of investing in myself, in those first initial few weeks, would spend a lot of time on analysis and understanding the data, and so that I could bring insights to meetings and problem solving sessions. And in terms of investing in the environment or picking the right environment, over time figuring out who are the right project leaders, teams to partner with, work with, who would provide that mentorship support, as well as the environment where I could get over these um, concerns I had about confidence.
Mm. I think, yeah, I think you're spot on. I think in our journey, in our career journey, it's very important to have that strong support system in the form of a sponsor or a mentor who kind of guides you and helps you come out of the imposter syndrome and the work that you yourself have to do to make yourself better and more confident. So another very common thing that I have noticed, and I've even read in books and heard in interviews, is when a woman is trying to establish herself as a leader and I wouldn't say aggressive, but is ambitious in her career to be a leader or to lead a project. Have you faced something like that where you were ambitious, but you were called as, that you're aggressive? Whereas the peers who had a similar traits or who were exhibiting similar behavior were called as ambitious people.
So, I mean, I am ambitious, and I think folks who work with me realize and understand that. But actually, I've had a very different experience. I've never been termed aggressive in my career. The constant constructive feedback I have got, constant and consistent constructive feedback throughout my career, is actually to be more assertive. So
Mm.
it's interesting that you can be ambitious, but at the same time not come across as super aggressive. And in fact, the feedback I receive is completely opposite, which is people want me to be more assertive and uh, be more direct.
Wow. So then, how do we position ourselves to be visible across the organization? What are the different projects or initiatives that you are part of, which kind of helped you gain the visibility? Or what is the advice that you will give to someone who's trying to climb up the ladder?
One is starting with the actual work you are doing, ensuring that that is high quality and high impact. Because at the end of the day, people would recognize you for the work you are doing. So really investing that time in the actual project you're doing. But as you rightly pointed out, Khushboo, sometimes that alone is not sufficient. You have to, in addition to doing good work, you also have to create the visibility around it, make sure you have sponsors, champions who would talk about your work, not just when they are having conversations with you, when you are in meetings and you're presenting the work, but also in conversations when you may not be in the room. So a lot of times your work will get presented when you may not be in the room by your seniors, and you want to have that kind of a support structure where they're recognizing your work and they're calling that out. So that's the approach or framework that I would use in terms of making sure that your work is so high quality that it's almost like people cannot ignore it. They have to recognize it, but at the same time, seek mentors, seek champions, seek sponsors who would give you that credit, give you the encouragement, and create opportunities for you. So I've been actually very lucky to have sponsors as well as mentors in all the companies I've worked with so far who have created those opportunities for me and who have coached and guided me to identify areas that I need to develop on, or if I've expressed an interest in a particular area or project, then they've kept their eyes open and sought those opportunities and made me aware of those opportunities. So investing in relationships, investing in getting those mentors, sponsors in a company, in your group, is highly important and something I would encourage all of us to do.
Yes, absolutely. And I think there was a book that Joanna Barsh once wrote when she was in McKinsey about how it is important, like, to have a sponsor, to have a mentor, but more important, to have a sponsor who can help you grow in your career. So you have a successful career and you've made a lot of meaningful relationships. You have an amazing family. So how do you manage both? Because most of us, while we are have this ambition to be a leader, we also have somewhere that guilt that, maybe we are compromising on giving time to our family, to our kids. So how do you manage everything?
Yeah. I personally feel it is manageable, and you could do both balancing work commitments as well as personal commitments. And that's how I like to think about it. Both work and family are part of life. So how do you ensure there is harmony between those two parts of your overall life or identity? Um, so I have been able, and I feel I've been able to strike that balance. A few things that have helped me along the way is, first of all, not thinking about work and personal commitments in these monolithic terms. That is work higher priority, is family higher priority, because it's hard to, you need to deconstruct and have more granular categories. So there are elements about family commitments that are obviously more important than work commitments. And there are some aspects of work that may be higher than some of the family or personal commitments. So, and the answer is different for everyone in terms of figuring out, what that prioritization is. But really thinking about, what's important for you, for your happiness, for the happiness of those around you is critical. So having that clarity, sharing that clarity with those who interact with you, both at home as well as at work, really helps to set the expectations with, especially people at work, in terms of, what are your personal boundaries, when do you need to leave, or, things, times when you may not be reachable, or, you'll be offline. So setting those expectations are really important. And the last thing I would say that is extremely important in order to strike that right balance is to have the right partner. I've been also very fortunate to have a partner at home who is truly an equal partner. His career and his job is as demanding, probably more demanding than my job. But we both share responsibilities at home, and that obviously helps with balancing professional and personal commitments. So that's how I've been able to strike the balance.
Oh, there's a very common saying that behind every successful man there is a woman, but I think it holds equally true in the reverse order as well. That behind every successful woman there is a man. So rightly said. So we also have Anshu with us. Hey Anshu, thank you so much for joining us. Anshu is currently the corporate VP, leading technology strategy and commercialization, and chief of staff to CTO Walmart. Thank you, Anshu, for joining us today.
Of course, glad to be here.
Right. So we were just having conversation with Shobhna about how is she able to manage both work and family. Is that something that you can share with us as well? Because you have a successful career. You've been director, senior director, now currently the VP. How have you managed both?
I totally agree with what Shobhna said. I think the thinking of things in monolithic terms is, it can't happen anymore because we don't live in an environment where you packed your bag at 8 a.m., got to work at, 8:39 and then left. But today work is coming into your house is coming into your work, especially now that we are in the COVID situation. So at least the way I like to look at it is you, for most people, there are five key things in life: work, family, health, hobbies, and friends. And at any given point in time, you can choose almost, I would say, 3 out of 5. And in my case, 2 out of 5, just because I don't have enough time. And you have to kind of choose what is more important for you at that point in time. So before I had kids, it was pretty much work, family, and friends. And family was just my husband. Now with kids, it's literally just work and friends. I mean, work and family. So hobbies and health have always taken a backseat, not a good thing. But you just have to make a conscious decision and a conscious effort to actually stick with that decision. So trying to be ambitious and trying to do everything, I think you burn yourself out. But most people would burn themselves out. I don't want to say that everyone would, but if there is a way to equally optimize every single bucket, then great. If not, then whichever bucket you want to optimize at that point in time, at that stage in your life cycle and your career, I think that makes most sense. And exactly to what Shobhna said, make sure to actually communicate that, so that people around you don't actually think you don't know or they don't know where they stand. So at any given point in time, making sure you set your boundaries, making sure you're constantly reevaluating out of these five, which ones do you want to go ahead with? And then the biggest thing I've realized is you can't have regrets. Like if I say I'm going to neglect X out of the five, or one or two or out of the five, then I never want to go back and have regrets on that, just because it doesn't really do you any good. You can always change it once you decide that this was not the right call, but definitely having no regrets. So for I think for some people, having it all is probably an ambitious target, and that's what makes them feel whole and makes them feel great, which is fantastic. And for others like me, I'm always on that balance of, okay, which one do I prioritize now versus going ahead with just one.
Nice. So I think the key takeaways are, it's important that you want to have everything, but it's also important to be content with what you have by working out your priorities, which is an amazing advice. So Anshu, we were talking about with Shobna about whether she felt imposter syndrome and how, or whether she was labeled as aggressive, but she was fortunate enough to have that strong support system in the form of mentors, sponsors. Did you have something similar as well?
No, so exactly like Shobna, I've never been called aggressive. In fact, every single time for the first 5, 6 years at Walmart, in my eval, it used to be like, we don't use the word aggressive, but assertive. So be more assertive. And I'm like, there's a balance between being assertive and having the humility. I don't want to let go of my humility because that's who I am.
Mhm.
Now I don't get that anymore. And I don't think I've changed anything. It's just that now that I've progressed in my career, it's actually helped because people add weight to what I say. And now humility is respected more than probably what it was when I was a senior manager. So, one learning for me is early on in your career, you have to find the right balance of sharing your voice and sharing your opinion.
Mhm.
And obviously, without losing the humility, because at the end of the day, people have to like you when they work with you. But sharing your voice in a way that people respect you for doing that. And then over time, like I am just totally myself right now. In fact, my mom tells me I've never gotten angry for the first 28 years of my life before I got married. I'm changing a little bit just because that perception of what works at work isn't equal to what works at home. I do agree with the point that you have to have mentors and sponsors. Personally, for me, I haven't over-indexed on that, but I have seen that, especially at companies like Walmart, and obviously when you're in consulting, a lot of the work that you do depends upon who you work with and how they champion you, and that's how everybody gets pulled up. Um, so from that standpoint, making sure that I really like Indra Nui's 5C concept. It stuck with me. So she talked about competency, courage and confidence, communication, consistency, and compass. And I think having a good measure of all those is very, very critical because over time, people do value all these things. It's just that you'll always come across some people who don't have the same value system as you do. And in that case, you morph yourself. But over time, I feel like once your work is given, you are able to speak to what you've done. You have others who like what you do, and they are able to speak to what you do and actually be a champion for you because you're not going to be in every meeting. Like I won't be in every meeting with our CEO, for instance, right?
Mhm.
Somebody has to represent saying, yes, this was work that was done by Anshu's team, and this is how they thought about it. So that gives you credibility. And then once you have that, you find a different voice, you find a different elevator pitch, so to speak, as you go along in your career. And over time, it just helps you become stronger as a leader and stronger as a human being.
Mhm. No, I think the 5C point that you made about Inda Nuri, I think they're amazing, and it makes so much sense to implement them in our career. So taking a step forward, when we are progressing in our career, promotion is a very big topic, where some of the women feel hesitant to go and talk to the manager about promotion or even like negotiating salary when they are getting a new job. I'll start with you first, Shobhna. So is there like a specific way, or was there any moments where you felt that you need to have that conversation? Or how important is it for a woman to speak up and talk to her manager about progressing in her career?
I think it is super important. I think all women should be having conversations with their teams and managers about their career path. And I can understand how it may not come naturally to some folks, and there may be hesitation. And there are ways and tools and languages you can use that help you navigate. I think it's perfectly, even if you don't want to use the term promotion, it's very sort of normal to ask your manager what your growth trajectory in the company looks like, what they would want to see in order to uh, have you promoted or have get you to the next level. So asking for feedback, knowing what the gaps are or what the perceived gaps may be in terms of getting to the next level is a perfectly fair question to ask. I would also encourage folks to have at least, once in 6 months kind of a career chat with your manager where you are having these conversations about both short-term growth as well as long-term career aspirations. And I think it's super critical to be direct and have those conversations, ask those questions in terms of what the growth path looks like.
Nice. What about you, Anshu?
Totally, couldn't agree more. And I think for me, it was a reality jolt about, I would say, about 10 years ago. There was somebody on the team she was just unabashedly proud of the fact that she negotiated the heck out of her salary when she got to Walmart. And I was like, really? You can do that? I didn't know you could do that. And I was like, okay. And then after that, every single time, every year or year and a half, I definitely asked my manager for feedback. I asked them, what does the career growth and trajectory look like? How do I get to the next level? What are the skill gaps that they see so that I can actually close them, even though if I may not have the direct responsibility? For example, when you're early on in your career, it's difficult to actually get people to report to you. So in my case, I just went out and started talking to folks who would work with me on projects so that I could influence in a very visible way. So even if they didn't report to me, I was responsible for the work that they were doing. So finding those areas of opportunity and actually filling them progressively. The other thing I've done is at larger companies, there's usually a framework which talks about what does it mean to have the competency and the skill set to get to the next level. So just really taking that and evaluating yourself where you think you are versus the next level. So for example, when I was at the senior director level, and I was writing my eval for the year, I literally took every single competency from the VP grade and I graded myself proactively on those competencies. And then I asked my manager, okay, what do you think? How am I doing? And he was just very surprised with the way I'd approached this. But that to me is, for me, like the next one would be SVP now. And it's no longer about doing the work that you're doing, it's about making sure that you set the strategy and you lead very effective teams. So every time that I'm investing an extra hour or 2 hours of my day in execution, that actually takes away from that. So having that sight on the next level and proactively talking to your manager. Now, there will be times, obviously, when your managers will not be super helpful. And you get that sense fairly quickly. To Shobna's point, if you're talking to them every 6 months, hopefully you know where you stand. And if you feel like this is not the right place for you to be, then proactively change. Don't waste time. There's no point just hanging around hoping things will change. So one is to change the group or change the area that you're working on, and the other is maybe the manager himself or herself doesn't really have a point of view on how to progress people. And if that is widespread, then going back to your sponsors, champions, mentors, asking them, getting feedback. Because if things need to change within the group, then you need allies who can help make that happen. Every company has a big, massive, especially big, large companies, I would say in the Fortune 500 for sure, all companies have a calibration meeting. So making sure that in the calibration meeting, you have people who are aware of the work that you have done and they can actually speak to that work, whether or not they manage you directly, because you need to have X number of yeses, right, before you get promoted. So that's on the promotion side. Same on the salary side. I would say you have to be proactive. These days, there are just so many tools available. You can Google and try and figure out what the average salary is. You can post a question on Blind. People will tell you at a certain level in a certain area what the salary structure looks like. In companies like ours, we actually tell people where everybody is in the band penetration. Usually, most folks are lower because if everybody was higher, then it becomes a problem for the company to manage their expense. However, once you know that and you feel like that is not commensurate with the work that you do, absolutely go back to the manager, go back to HR, try to figure out what's going on. And if there is any scope for getting an adjustment, then proactively do that.
Well, at least I am learning a lot of things from you both, and I'm sure others who've joined us as well are making notes of things that you guys are sharing with us. So let me take you
Sorry,
guys.
Khushboo, can I just add one more thing?
Sure,
Don't
absolutely.
let all of this go against your grain, because if you go in a different direction because Shobhna and I are saying certain things to you guys, make sure that that fits within the construct of who you are and what you want to do at that point in time. So, just make sure that you adjust all of these to the situation that you're in at that point in time.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes what happens is that we've been doing certain things in a certain way, which are not giving results that we hope for. So having these different ideas that you guys have shared from your life gives us another perspective on what else we can try to achieve the results that we haven't got so far. So now I'm going to take you guys back in time, and if you guys can share with me, what advice would you give yourself back when you were starting your career? Because looking back at your career, you've achieved so much, but when you started, was there something that you felt you wish somebody had told you uh, that could have made a difference? So I'll start with you first, Anshu.
Yeah. I had a certain vision of where I wanted to go because when I started off, this was, 2008 and the financial crisis had still not hit.
Mhm.
So I interned at Bear Stearns. I was like, awesome, I'm going to go and become an investment banker. And then in mid-March, Bear Stearns got bought by JP Morgan. And within a month, JP Morgan basically said, I think mid-April or something, maybe end of April, sorry guys, none of you all have jobs. And I was like, okay, this is not the best situation to be in. But at that point in time, I did what I thought was right because I was the SABG co-chair and I had a conference to run. So I did not spend any time on recruiting. And the day I graduated, I was pretty much all hell breaking loose situation because everybody had a job. I did not have a job. I was busy running a conference. And that period was so stressful. So from July, when we all graduated until August or June, sorry, for 2 months without a job, it was so stressful. And I thought it was the end of the world. But I think, and I knew it back then also, but it just didn't, that light bulb didn't go off. But won't necessarily turn out the way you want it to. And that's okay because you have to keep at it. All of us come with a certain sense of, importance on education, knowing that we all will be able to get a job. There is no way none of us graduating will not get a job. In fact, there is no way if you're an enterprising person, you won't get a job or you won't be able to make a living unless something is really, really bad. So I think keeping that confidence in yourself and continue going at it, I think that is very, very critical. Not losing hope. Not that I lost hope, but not losing hope. And just knowing that at the end of the day, it's your confidence that matters and the people around you that matter. Because again, if you have a really good support system and there are people who are helping you to pick yourself back up, then you can just do wonders in whatever you want to do and not judge yourself because it was very easy for me to again judge myself where everybody else had gone out and done the homework and I hadn't of getting the job that I wanted. However, I was focused on a different thing altogether. So not judging yourself, keeping at it, to a certain extent, keeping your head down and really thinking outside the box. So for me, thinking outside the box at that point in time was, I have some experience in retail. I've learned some finance. Can I put these two together? And that's where I landed at Target and that's where I landed at Walmart. And it's been great. I mean, I couldn't complain more. But the one advice I would give myself is have confidence and keep at it. And life is a jungle gym. It'll get you to where you want to as long as you have the will to do it.
I think that message resonates very well, especially in the environment we are right now. Like back in 2020, a lot of people lost their jobs. So this is a good message for them that don't lose hope. Keep on trying. Sooner or later, you will get what you want. What about you, Shobhna?
First of all, plus one to what Anshu said. Great advice, and that's a amazing story to share, Anshu. In terms of advice I would give, so I graduated in 2011, and the advice I would give, if to myself graduating or in my sort of first few months post graduation, would be to think about investing in my network and my relationships, professional network relationships, as much as I focused on the actual projects and work. I think I was always very focused on delivering the presentation or the projects that I worked on. But I think I could have invested more time in um, the people that I worked with, the networks that I had access to, as well as just forming deeper relationships with my coworkers as well as classmates. Because looking back, 10 years later, what stays with you is not that presentation, that client meeting, or the project or the problem you solved. It's the people that you worked with, the memories you form with them, and spending equal, if not more, time with them. I would have liked to do that in hindsight.
Absolutely. And we have LinkedIn now. So I think LinkedIn itself is forming such a strong community for people to network, for people to know each other, which is amazing. Like how it's transformed the whole industry itself. So now we're going to open up the floor for Q&A. LeeAnn, do you want to take over? But before LeeAnn joins, I just want to say thank you so much, guys. I enjoyed it. Like I loved it. And I'm sure others are going to say resonate the same feeling with you guys.
Thank you. Thanks for all the thoughtful questions.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Khushboo. What a wonderfully moderated session and really thoughtful questions. I think about how we navigate the sometimes challenging environment of personal and professional growth. I'd like to invite all of you to join, those of you who feel comfortable with your video and your audio. We're going to open it up to an interactive Q&A session. I know some folks asked some questions in the chat. I'm not sure if we answered those fully. So please join us and let's see each other's faces and say where we're logging on from and give us some context to some of your questions today.
Hi, I have a question. This is RY. Thank you guys so much. I'm logging on from Chicago. Quite a lot of snow. So I like your background, Anshu. It's beautiful, probably on the West Coast. So my question is, when you guys are stepping into your leadership roles, how do you think about, or how did you think about building relationships laterally with other leaders in the company? Or did you have to think about that? And what advice would you give to the rest of us? Thank you. And let me know if that question doesn't make sense. I'm just thinking about, corporations that I've worked in, the leaders, they tend to have to conduct leadership meetings. So how do you influence peers at other leaders at your level? And how do you go about initially building, when you're new into your leadership role, how do you go about building collaborative, effective relationships with peers, leadership peers at your leadership level? Thank you.
Thank you. Happy to share thoughts there. So at least in my current role, which is the business operations role, it tends to be very, very cross-functional. You partner with a number of different functions and functional leaders. So product, engineering, sales, marketing, data science, finance. And to your question, collaborating well with all the other leaders is a key component of being successful in the role as well as being effective in the role. And to me, it almost starts before you become a leader or start managing a team. Even as an IC, partnering well with folks across different functions is critical to be effective for your projects and delivering value on or having impact on your projects. And as you've invest in those relationships even as an IC, and form strong relationships with peers in other parts of the organization or other functions. One thing to realize is that those peers would also grow with you. So the ICs in other functions are also going to grow with you and become leaders of their functions. So if you have invested in those relationships over time, as a leader, it obviously become easier to continue that partnership, and helping others be successful, trying to see how you can share information with the other business partners, other functional leaders in helping the entire project and the entire team be successful goes a long way. So it again goes back to my point around investing in relationships and building those stronger relationships over time, and building that trust and consistency over time that would strengthen that relationship.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think no matter where you are, you have to have a group of people around you that can actually vouch for you, vouch for your work, and end of the day help you succeed. So by nature, even though I talk a lot, I'm fairly introvert. I don't like talking. But if I'm in a meeting, I will talk. And if I'm, in a work situation, I will talk. That's where I spend my energy. But if I'm working on my own, and let's say when early on I was in my strategy roles, it was very easy to just go into my shell and just work on my own. But having said that, it doesn't actually help you learn as you go along. So even for you to do your job better, you actually have to learn what's happening in other parts of the business. So in my case, in the early stages, I actively sought out projects where I would learn a little bit about different functions and then help them think differently about their work. So that was one way of going out. And obviously, Shobhna hit the nail on the head. Like, your peers will ultimately also grow into leadership roles. So they become your advocates as you go along. The one thing I do think a lot of people over-index on is talking to the C level early on in their careers, which is great from a learning standpoint. But when you are ready to become a leader, they're probably gone. So they're not the ones pounding the table for you. Just a little bit, things that I've gathered along the way, because when I started off in e-commerce, my then COO became CFO of Nestle, and then she became the head of Asia Pac. But then she left the company when it was time for me, and it was time for her to actually come in and say, yes, Anshu is great, let's promote her. Same with our CEO of Global E-commerce. I worked with him extremely closely, and then he retired. So there, again, I learned a lot. The learning was there, but that pounding the table did not carry through. So from a relationship standpoint, you have to have, at all different levels, you have to have a certain network which will help you. So if you're starting out at, let's say an execution beginner level, then having people around you, and then 1 or 2 levels above. And then as you go more into your career, you basically start expanding the network. So that's within the company. And I think outside the company is equally important, because like in Silicon Valley, it's a very, very, very small world, smaller than I realized it ever would be. But earlier, about like 10 years ago, we were the Cosmics Mafia, and now we are becoming, then we became eBay Mafia, and now we are PayPal Mafia. That's how pretty much everything, like people, once a leader comes in, they start bringing in people from their old companies. So to the extent that you've actually reached out and also established relationships externally, I think that also helps you in unexpected ways. So it's not just internal, but also external. And then continuing, the one thing I would say is Chicago Booth Network has been extremely, extremely helpful for me personally. Even if you write to, assuming the emails are correct, I have never seen less than a 90% response rate. And obviously you have to make it worth the while for the person you're trying to connect with, versus just saying, hey, I need a job in your company. Can you help me? Like, at least send them, this is the job I need, or this is who I want to talk to. So at least there's some dialogue. But actively tapping into that network and just learning, because I think if you're not learning as you go along, and you're not able to connect that learning back to people that you're networking with, then it just becomes like you're networking for the sake of networking without having a relationship where there's some sort of a give and take.
Okay, thank you both so much, Shobhna and Anshu. Thank you so much for sharing that. And it's also nice to hear you say that you're an introvert and still be in that leadership position. It's something probably a lot of introverts on the video call think about is, can I be an introvert and still aspire to that position? So thank you for sharing that as well. Thank you both.
And you absolutely can aspire to be a leader as an introvert. I'll +1 that. I'm also a very, very strong introvert.
Can I ask?
Yes.
That's fun too.
Yes.
Hi.
That's good to hear. Thank
Hi.
you.
Can I ask a quick question from here? Hi.
Yes, we can hear you. Yeah.
All right, good, good. Hi, this is Suyu from, I'm dining from Houston, and really glad to have, hear your insights and experience, really encouraging and inspiring. So my question is, I'm playing a tech business role as well in big corporate. Really glad to hear the insights from you. It's very helpful, giving a lot of directional sense. My question is like, I'm leading a team, it's a tech business role. Working with peers and the upper class is pretty much dominated by male. So as a female leader, how do you be likable from your team, from your boss, and from your peers at the same time, working with the team to achieve the goal?
I'm in the exact same position as you, Suyu. So I report to our CTO, who's a male. He has 11 direct reports, and I'm one of the 2 females he has as direct reports. I'm not an engineer by profession. I've never coded in my entire life. And here I am sitting with people who have PhDs in computer science, in mathematics, people who've run extremely large organizations. I'm a VP, and then I'm also sitting with, EVPs in the room. I think the biggest thing is, personally for me, it has never mattered whether I have males or females around me. And I know that I probably am in a unique position, one because of the company and one because of who I am. We're 3 sisters, and my parents always raised us never comparing with anybody. Like, especially when you think about 40 years ago, growing up in India, there was potentially a culture where people said, you need to have a son in the house, right? My parents never thought about that. It was us. All 3 of us are extremely confident and very well educated. They laid a lot of emphasis on being curious, on learning. And that piece has helped me even today, because I'm going into meetings with extremely qualified people having an opinion on what, the network of the future looks like. How should we think about our cloud infrastructure? But all that comes with a lot of reading and trying to talk to people to make an informed opinion, so that I can actually sit at the table and not have the imposter syndrome, because it's very easy to have that imposter syndrome. So I think in your situation, and I'm happy to chat with you offline if you want, but based on what you are saying, I feel like there are a lot of parallels. The way I've handled it is making sure that I understand the context of the other person and where they're coming from, and then doing my own homework and research to actually present a very coherent point of view. And sometimes I would disagree with them too, right? But I need to make sure that I disagree and I have very valid points why I disagree. And I go an extra mile in saying, I actually want to talk to a few more folks who can help me change the mind of the person that I'm talking to. Because if I'm talking to the EVP of platforms, I better make sure that 3 layers down, everybody agrees with what I'm saying. So then it becomes easy for him to actually change his mind versus saying, okay, why don't you go and talk to these 5 other people and then I have to change my mind, which is also fine. But eventually, if I'm taking a stand on something, especially when it comes to running operations, I'm running budgets right now, and I'm the one making the call, and nobody likes it right now, right? Like the calls that I'm making, they might think their project is the most important, but have a unique view of what is important for the company. So making sure they understand that view, making sure they're never surprised, making sure that you're always aligned with them ahead of time, so that they don't look bad in a meeting. I think all these little things, which go for males and females both, I think these things have really, really helped me.
Thank you very much, Anshu. I couldn't agree with more about the Chicago approach. The insight, I think the inquiry, interest, insight, the 3I approach, the analytical approach from Chicago, it's very helpful for me to, bring the team together and success. Thank you.
+1 to what Anshu said, especially on the mindset aspect. So I also grew up in India, and having gone to an engineering school in India, I'm like used to seeing less than 5%, less than 10% women in a room.
Mm-hmm.
So over time, you just accept it. So now when I actually see 30% women in a room, that's a big improvement. I'm like delighted to see, 25, 30% women in a room, because again, the starting point or the expectation from where, I've come from, or I've seen like 15, 20 years ago is so different. So I think that mindset, that it doesn't matter if I'm the only woman in the room really helps. So the mindset definitely helps. Then similar to what Anshu said, knowing, what your value add is in a meeting and what sort of content expertise you can bring to the meeting, to the room is super helpful. And again, content doesn't depend whether, you're a male or a female, you can bring expertise either way. And the last thing I would say is play to your strengths. So as a woman, you, especially in terms of culture, you can bring a very fresh perspective, fresh, way of bringing the team together in terms of, for example, some of the team meetings I have organized. Typically, when men do sort of social events, they're all around happy hours. But as a woman, you can, plan team events which have a different flavor, different touch to them, and create a more inclusive team culture for everyone. And sometimes people like that change, people like that freshness, and a different kind of team culture versus just going out and doing happy hours, which obviously in the COVID environment we can't do. But once we go back, playing to your strengths and bringing that different perspective also helps.
Actually, thank you very much. I want to share some of the insights I learned from another forum. It was in Chinese. But I like to share with that because it's very interesting insight. Basically, the guy said, the labor market, the characteristic of labor market changed, evolved from history. If you look at 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, it's agricultural, it's first generation of industry revolution. The labor demand is pretty much dominated by labor, like strength. So that's why nowadays information age come and technology driven industry evolution. So as a female, basically it's our strength. We are detail oriented, we are hard workers, we do a lot of we have a lot of characteristics that we can place strengths in this information, technology-driven industry revolution. So I think that's the sharing I want to, that's the insight I want to share with you, because there's an evolution of change from the labor market demand perspective. So I think, this is the age for us to rise, if I could say.
For sure. And if I can just jump in, I'd like to say we're living in wonderful, unique times for inclusive leadership. And I think that a lot that has happened in the last few years has really brought that to a lot of the executive roundtable conversations. And so I think we have a lot to gain from this. I had a question for our speakers as well. Prior to us launching today, I mentioned that I belong to a leadership group of women in a book club. Are the two of you reading any books that might be relevant for our audience? And are you a part of any leadership groups that might be of interest to our audience?
I can talk about a book I'm reading right now. It's called Nonviolent Communication, and really enjoying the book. It talks about how we start with the principle of listening and understanding what others are trying to communicate versus jumping to either problem solving issue for them or sharing our own perspective. So that's a book I'm reading right now and enjoying it. So if you want a book recommendation for the book club.
Anshu, do you have any?
Nothing. All I do is work and look after the two kids. Mm. Then when they go out to play, then I'm folding laundry. No.
Hey, a podcast will work too, Anshu, if there's anything that you can. So you added How Women Rise to the chat. The book from the Booth Women Advantage program.
Actually, I have a question. Hi, well, first of all, thank you so much for sharing the insights. I am Senior Vice President and Portfolio Manager at Merrill Lynch, is Wall Street firm, as you all know. So it just a completely different perspective. We work hard, extra hours just to get where you can get. And before you know it, oh, I'm this only woman in the room. So so I'm so delighted to so many, female leaders here sharing their experiences. So I would like to ask both of you, Was the leadership brought into your career, or you are actively seeking for it? Like a seeking leadership that, oh, before you know it, hey, I'm the manager of your 10 people team, or so on and forth.
I can start. I don't think I ever actively thought about that. However, I just feel like the way I grew up and the way I watched around people around me. So my dad used to work with the central government in India, and he was in a secretarial position, which is I don't know how to describe it. It's a very advanced position, and you pretty much have the keys to the kingdom if you're in that position. And he was constantly organizing people, trying to make things better within his department. And he held a dual role. So that was one benchmark. The other benchmark was my mom. And she was a teacher, but she always had aspirations to become a principal. So those two benchmarks, and then everybody around me in my extended family was pretty much in kind of making their way towards leadership positions. So funny anecdote for you guys, when I started writing my essays, not what I wrote, but when I started writing my essays, I actually wrote a essay which was a Fortune 1 cover. And I was like on the cover of the magazine. And my husband said, this is too pompous. You cannot be writing this. There was nothing pompous that I actually wrote in that. But I think my mental aspiration is always to lead people, help people to get to where they want to be. And ultimately, the essay that I wrote was all about how can I be a helping leader? So it's not that I actively am thinking I need to get to the next managerial position, but I think it just comes very naturally to me, where I'm always organizing people, helping them figure out where they want to get to, helping move projects along, create, remove roadblocks if needed. Today, I don't think that, a singular aspiration of saying I want to become CEO of a company still stands, just because it's a lot of hard work. I'm getting gray hair already. I don't know if I want to do that. However, I do think an IC role would be great, but that will not be the full use of the potential that I feel I have and I can contribute to my company and to society overall. So haven't actively sought it out. It's always there in the back of my mind. And I feel like that then keeps pushing me forward. But someday if I need to pack up my bags and just stay at home, I can absolutely do that too.
Very inspiring. For me, I've had two moments where I've transitioned from an IC role to a team leadership role. The first one was in consulting, and that was a very sort of structured process. You are a consultant or an associate for 2 years, and then depending on your ratings and performance, you get promoted to the engagement manager role. So that transition is, very structured. You know the timelines, you know what it takes. The second time I transitioned from an IC to a people manager role was at LinkedIn. So I had joined as an IC in 2015. And shortly after I joined, my manager who had hired me, she left the company. So that created room or opportunity for somebody to step up. But at that time, the senior leadership was still looking to backfill my manager who had left. So it wasn't a given that, because it had only been like 3 months, since I joined the company. So it wasn't a given that I would step into that role. But while they were hiring for my manager's backfill, it took, 3 or 4 months. And during those 3 or 4 months, I had done enough projects, delivered enough impact that gave the senior leadership confidence that no, we don't need to hire a manager for Shobhna. We can actually give her the responsibility to manage the team. And that's how in early 2016 is when I transitioned from an IC role to a manager role, started leading the team. At that time, it was a very small team. It was only like 2 people. So that transition happened. But then over time, as the business grew, as I continued to deliver impact and value, the team grew, and now it's about a 20-person team. So it again was very organic, that it wasn't planned, but you have to be the right person at the right place and right time. And I think what you can focus on is how you make yourself the right person, and the other things, hopefully would fall in place. But sometimes it's a mix of your own, pushing and making sure that you are creating opportunities for yourself. You're making sure your work gets visibility. at the same time, sometimes, it's also a little bit of the circumstances.
But obviously from your talk, I'm so delighted to hear that you mentioned you consider yourself ambitious. I think a lot of women, particularly even on Wall Street, they're ambitious, but they would never say that. You can tell, but they would not say that. And sometimes when other people got promoted, they were like, I did this much, how come I didn't get promoted? But then it showed they wanted to get promoted, but they really did not do enough to get there. But I love the way that you said, yes, I'm ambitious, I want to go higher. But so I think the story you shared, I got was that, yes, indeed, the upper management saw you have the capabilities of leading a team, but also I sense that you also actively showed, yes, I am capable of doing the manager, we're doing. So I think probably there are both elements into this accidental promotion, I would say. Do you agree?
I agree. I think for any sort of growth, there is a combination of your own self and the impact and value that you bring, how much you're investing in your own growth, and there is that support system that we've talked about earlier, in terms of making sure you have the right mentors, you have the right leaders who are have that, who don't have biases against you, or who don't have any sort of reason that they would not invest in you. And if that is not the case, as Anshu said earlier, don't waste time. Find a group, find a team, find a company that is that creates an inclusive environment and creates opportunities for people of diverse background, men, women, different ethnic backgrounds, introverts, extroverts. There are different forms of diversity, and you have to choose the right company, the right environment that would support people of diverse backgrounds. So LinkedIn is definitely one of those companies where people of all backgrounds can succeed and be successful, and I've definitely benefited from that.
Thank you very much for insightful experience and then sharing. It's amazing time to see so many peers are advancing. It's awesome feeling. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I think as we wrap up this conversation, thank you so much, Anshu and Shobhna, for joining us today and for sharing your inspiring story. All of us have learned a lot. All of us have got new ideas on how we can approach a problem that comes our way to progress in our career. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for joining us today. I hope you guys enjoyed the session and looking forward to seeing you guys very soon.
Thank you, Khushboo, for organizing. It was wonderful.
It was great. Thank you.
Thank you, Khushboo. Thanks, LeeAnn.
Thank you, guys.